Hi guys! So recently in some of my videos I have mentioned to you guys that I plan to self-publish, and I've had quite a few people ask why I'm choosing self-publishing over traditionally publishing, but I think before I can mention why I want to self-publish, I have to kind of explain the pros and cons of both traditionally publishing and self-publishing. I'm going to start with traditionally published first because I think that's the one that most writers aspire to and that's what most readers read. So with traditionally published, the very first thing after you finish writing your book is to start querying. Querying or writing a query letter is where you try to convince an agent to represent your book because you're going to more than likely need an agent to get them to act as the middleman between you and publishing companies. The next step after writing query letters is once you have finally actually succeeded in getting an agent. Agents, like I said, are people that serve as middlemen or middlewomen between you and publishing companies. It is their job to try and convince publishing companies that your book is awesome and that it deserves to be published through them. Once an agent actually has convinced a publishing company to represent you, they are going to make 15% of all the money that you make off of your book. Just because you get an agent, though, does not mean that you immediately are going to have your book published through your dream publishing house. It likely means you're going to have to do step number 3, which is just sit and wait. It more than likely took you a long time to convince an agent that your work is worth representing, but then they have to then do that same process to publishing companies. This, of course, though, eventually should lead into you getting a contract or at least offers from publishing companies. Every contract with a publishing company is completely different, and how much money you get offered is going to be completely dependent on how successful they think your book is going to be. The good news is you are more than likely going to get some money up front for your book, which is always really exciting. And then beyond that, you don't have to go and pay for an editor. You don't have to pay for a cover designer and a formatter because the publishing company is going to do all of that for you. This is, of course, a pro because then more time can be spent writing instead of worrying about all that other stuff. But it can also be a con because depending on how much freedom you were given in your contract, you may not have that much of a say in the formatting, the cover, and the editing. Another thing you might have to think about is often publishing companies, if you're a first-time author, aren't necessarily sure that your book is going to do well. So if you were planning on writing a series, they don't know if anybody's going to want to bother reading books 2, books 3, books 4, and so on. So they're going to possibly encourage you to make the end of your book 1 quite conclusive so it can serve as a standalone if they feel like they don't want to then represent you for later books. Going along with that same idea, if your book 1 doesn't do as well as the publishing company would have liked, but you signed a contract with them for a certain amount of years, you then have to wait until that set amount of years is over before you can then buy the rights to the book back and actually finish your series or publish more books. Just because those things have happened to some authors, of course, does not mean it happens to all of them. Really important thing to do is just to make sure that if you're getting offered a contract from a publishing company, you really make sure you are getting the kind of contract that you want. That being said, a lot of other people feel that they can risk all of that because they know publishing companies are going to take the time to market the heck out of their books so they don't have to worry about marketing at all, and that unfortunately is a myth. Yes, publishing companies are going to market your book because they make money off of your book and they're going to want to make money off your book. So if they don't market, they're not going to get anything in return. However, they don't just have this endless supply of money to spend on every single author that they represent, so most of their money is going to go to the authors they know are going to make them money. They're still going to encourage you to start getting out there, getting your name heard, people seeing your face, and they're going to encourage you to do a lot of social media. All that being said, a huge benefit to traditionally publishing is that you will get more than likely an advance on royalties. This means that when you sign a contract, you are already being given money for your book, whether it sells 10 copies or 10 million copies. Like I said before, the amount that you can get is completely dependent on so many different factors that it's not conclusive how much money you're likely to receive. But just for fun, we're going to say that they offer you $10,000 for your book. $10,000 is a lot of money. However, before you actually get $10,000, you can't forget that your agent also gets at least usually 15% of that. So now you're looking more at $8,500. Then after that, you have to pay taxes on that amount of money. So now we've gone from $8,500 to, we'll round up and say $7,000. From there, you usually are not going to get that $7,000 all up front. It's usually going to be broken up into 3 separate payments, so we'll say around $2,300, $2,400. That's of course still a good amount of money, but when you think about how many hours and hours and hours people pour into their stories trying to make them absolutely perfect, that's really pretty bad. From there though, a lot of people think, well, I'm okay making not that much money on my advance because I'm going to be making royalties on all the books I sell, and that's kind of a little bit of a myth also. The way an advance against royalties works is you don't make a penny in royalties until your advance has been met. So if we're doing the $10,000 example, you're not going to see any money in royalties until you've had your book make at least $10,000. From there, it fluctuates slightly depending on if it's hardcover, paperback, what your contract says, but around 10 to 15% of royalties are what you're going to make once you've actually hit the advance. So if your book is selling for $20 in hardback and you make 10% of that, then you're going to make $2 in royalties after the initial $10,000 has been met, and you still have to think about paying your agent the 15% of all the profits that you get. Now looking at the route for self-publishing. If we start at the very beginning like we did for traditionally published, you're gonna of course be able to skip a first few steps. You're not going to need to query agents, you're not gonna need an agent, and you're not gonna have to wait around for a publisher to pick up your book, make you a good contract, and then sell your book. A small clarification, you may not need an agent, but a lot of self-published authors end up getting agents. Just throwing that out there in case you've heard about that and wondered about that. For the sake of this video, we're going to say that you don't need an agent. So you get to skip all those first few steps and you get to jump right into a different kind of awful experience, and that would be going through critique partners and beta readers. I say awful because I'm comparing it to the querying phase for traditionally published authors. You're going to get people who think your book isn't any good, or you're gonna get people who are really wonderful and really kind, but still tear your book apart. And ultimately, this is what you need, this is what you have to hear in order to get your book better, but it just doesn't have the same kind of feeling as it would if you kind of already knew at least that your book was going to be successful to an extent with a traditionally published company. The positive though is that you have complete creative control, so if your beta reader or critique partner tells you that they don't like something in your book, you might be able to say that you think that that part is great and it's perfect, and you can leave it in if you want. The same goes for actually having your book professionally edited, which if you are going to do the self-published route, highly recommend you take this step. I do not advise you go without a professional edit. It's expensive, but you're gonna need it. The biggest difference though with the editing phase between self-published and traditionally published is if you don't agree with your editor on a certain thing that they recommend, ultimately it is just a recommendation. You have the power to say, no, I want to leave it like it is, where you might not have that option if you're doing traditionally published. Probably want to listen to your editor. They're professionals, they know what they're talking about, so most of what they say is going to probably be what you should do, but it's nice to know that if you disagree with something that you have the right to say, no, I'm gonna leave it like it is. An upside and a downside after that is that you are going to have to probably pay a professional cover designer and a professional formatter, but the upside is that you have, again, complete creative control, so you can make your cover look like whatever you want it to look like. You also have creative control when it comes to the content, so if you, kind of an example I was giving before, really want your book to end on a cliffhanger, or if you want it to be somewhat unresolved at the end because you know that's the setup you want for the next books in your series, you can do that. You don't need anybody breathing down your back or putting pressure on you to write your book a certain way. And from a money standpoint, all the royalties you make pretty much just go to you. You don't have to worry about paying an agent. You don't have to worry about a certain advance being met before you make royalties. If you sell your book for 20 bucks, you're pretty much getting all that money. Anyway, there you go guys. Those are the main pros and cons that go along with self-publishing and traditionally publishing. Hopefully all of this was informative and helpful, but regardless, you guys should still, of course, look into this from people who know what they're talking about way more than I do and who don't hold a certain bias towards one option or the other. If you have anything else to add to the conversation, please feel free to do so in the comments section down below. But anyway, if you guys like the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the little bell icon so you get notified when I post new videos, and check out some of my videos right over here. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Bye.